The rain was merciless that November evening, turning the streets of Manhattan into rivers of forgotten dreams. Among the crowd of umbrellas and designer coats, there was one figure that didn't belong, a young woman huddled beneath a tattered blanket, her trembling hand extended toward the passing strangers who never looked down. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the thunder. "Anything you can spare." But they walked past her. They always did. What none of them knew, what she herself had almost forgotten, was that 5 years ago, this same girl had walked these very streets in Valentino heels, with a driver waiting at every corner and a black card that knew no limit. Her name was Isabella Thornton. And she was supposed to be dead. Isabella pulled the soaked blanket tighter around her shoulders, her fingers numb from the cold. The cardboard sign beside her had long since dissolved into mush, the words "hungry. Anything helps" now just a blur of ink and rain. She'd positioned herself outside the Cartier store on Fifth Avenue, not because she expected generosity from the wealthy, but because she remembered. She remembered standing in that very store, trying on a diamond bracelet worth more than most people earned in a year, laughing as her father insisted she needed matching earrings. She remembered the smell of expensive leather from the boutiques, the taste of champagne at charity galas, the feeling of silk against her skin. Now, she knew the taste of day-old bread from dumpsters and the feeling of concrete against her bones. "Move along," a security guard said, not unkindly. He'd told her the same thing yesterday, and the day before. "You can't stay here." Isabella nodded, gathering her few possessions, a plastic bag with a change of clothes, a water bottle, and a photograph so worn it was barely recognizable. She didn't argue. She'd learned that lesson the hard way, with bruises that had taken weeks to fade. She moved to her second spot, 3 blocks down, near the subway entrance. Here, at least, the overhang provided some shelter from the rain. She settled against the wall, watching the river of people flow past, executives checking their phones, couples holding hands, teenagers laughing about something on their screens. None of them saw her. That was the cruelest part of being homeless, Isabella had discovered. It wasn't the hunger or the cold or even the danger. It was the invisibility. The way people's eyes would slide right past you, as if you were just another piece of urban furniture, no more worthy of notice than a fire hydrant or a parking meter. "Spare some change?" she asked a man in a Burberry coat. He walked faster. "Please, I haven't eaten," she started to say to a woman with shopping bags. The woman clutched her purse tighter and crossed to the other side of the street. Isabella swallowed the familiar sting of rejection and pulled her knees to her chest. 5 years. 5 years since the night that had destroyed everything. 5 years since her father's business partner, Marcus Blackwood, had walked into their estate with a smile on his face and murder in his heart. She could still see it, the flash of the gun, her mother's scream, her father's body crumpling to the floor. She could still hear Marcus's cold voice, "The company is mine now. The empire I helped build. Your father was going to push me out, make you the heir. But you're just a spoiled little girl who's never worked a day in her life." Isabella had run. She'd run through the mansion, out the back entrance, into the night. She'd heard the gunshots behind her, the bullets meant for her. She'd heard her mother screaming her name one last time before the sound was cut short by another shot. She'd run until her lungs burned and her feet bled. She'd hidden in alleys and abandoned buildings. She'd watched from the shadows as the news reported the tragic home invasion that had killed tech billionaire Robert Thornton, his wife Catherine, and their daughter Isabella. A robbery gone wrong, they said. The suspects were still at large. But Isabella knew the truth. Marcus had made it look like a robbery. He'd probably paid off the investigators, used his position on the board to take control of Thornton Technologies, and consolidated his power while the city mourned the loss of one of its most prominent families. And Isabella had been too afraid to come forward. Because who would believe a terrified 18-year-old girl against a powerful man like Marcus Blackwood? He had resources, connections, lawyers. He'd make her disappear for real this time. So she'd done the only thing she could. She'd disappeared on her own terms. She'd cut her long auburn hair short and dyed it black. She'd sold her jewelry to shady pawn shops for a fraction of their worth. She'd avoided cameras, changed her name, and tried to survive. But money ran out quickly when you didn't know how to budget, when you'd never had to worry about the price of food or shelter. Her naivety about the real world had cost her everything. Within 6 months, she was on the streets. That was 4.5 years ago. "Hey you!" Isabella looked up to find a teenage boy standing over her, his phone pointed at her face. Behind him, 2 of his friends were laughing. "Say hi to TikTok," the boy said, zooming in on her face. Isabella turned away, pulling the blanket over her head. This happened sometimes. People who thought homelessness was entertainment, who filmed vulnerable people for likes and shares. "Ah, come on,"
one of the friends said.
Do something crazy. Our viewers love crazy homeless people. Please, Isabella said quietly. Just leave me alone. They laughed harder. The boy with the phone crouched down, getting a better angle. What's your story?
Drugs? Alcohol?
Bad boyfriend. Isabella closed her eyes, trying to block them out. She'd learned that engaging only made it worse. They'd get bored and move on eventually. They always did. Leave her alone. The voice was male, authoritative, and unfamiliar. Isabella opened her eyes to see a man in an expensive suit standing between her and the teenagers. He was tall, broad-shouldered, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair and a face that commanded respect. We're just having fun, the boy with the phone said, but he'd already lowered it. No, the man said firmly. You're harassing someone who's already having a difficult day. Move along, or I'll make sure your parents see that video. The teenagers exchanged glances, then shuffled away, muttering about how everyone was too sensitive these days. The man turned to Isabella.
Are you all right?
She nodded, not trusting her voice. Acts of kindness were so rare that they always made her emotional, and she'd learned that showing emotion on the streets was dangerous. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. Isabella tensed. She'd learned to be wary of men with wallets, of the strings that sometimes came attached to their generosity. But he simply pulled out several $20 bills and held them out to her. There's a shelter 3 blocks east, he said. They serve hot meals and have beds available. It's not much, but it's warm and safe. Isabella stared at the money in his hand.
$100.
More than she usually made in a month of begging. Thank you, she whispered, taking the bills with shaking hands. He nodded and started to walk away, then paused. He turned back, his brow furrowed as he studied her face. Isabella's heart began to race. Had he recognized her? Even with the short dark hair and the gaunt face, was there something in her features that reminded him of the girl in the news photos from 5 years ago?
Have we met before? He asked.
No, Isabella said quickly.
Too quickly.
I don't think so. He continued to stare at her, his expression puzzled. Your eyes. There's something familiar about them. Isabella looked down, letting her hair fall across her face. I just have one of those faces. Maybe, he said, but he didn't sound convinced. He pulled out a business card and handed it to her. If you ever need help, real help, not just money, call that number. Ask for James. Isabella took the card but didn't look at it. Thank you for your kindness. He nodded again and walked away, glancing back once before disappearing into the crowd. Isabella waited until he was gone before looking at the card. It was simple, elegant. James Chen, Executive Vice President, Thornton Technologies. Her hand began to shake so badly that she almost dropped the card.
Thornton Technologies. Her father's company.
The company that Marcus Blackwood had stolen. And this man, this James Chen, worked there. Isabella's mind raced. She'd avoided anything to do with Thornton Technologies for 5 years, too afraid that Marcus had people watching for any sign of her. But here was someone from inside the company, someone who'd shown her kindness without knowing who she was. Someone who might be able to help her reclaim what was rightfully hers. Or someone who might lead Marcus straight to her. She tucked the card inside her plastic bag, beneath the photograph, the only picture she had left of her family, taken at her 18th birthday party just 2 weeks before they died. In it, her mother's arm was around her shoulders, her father was laughing at something off camera, and Isabella herself was radiant in a silver dress, diamonds at her throat, the whole world at her feet. She looked nothing like that girl anymore. Isabella used 50 of the $100 to buy food from a nearby deli, a sandwich, a bottle of water, and a cup of hot coffee that made her hands tingle as warmth returned to them. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, making it last. She'd learned to make food last. The shelter James had mentioned was indeed 3 blocks east. Isabella had been there before, but beds filled up quickly, and if you weren't in line by 5 o'clock, you were out of luck. It was only 3:30 now. She might actually get a bed tonight. A real bed, with a pillow and a blanket that didn't smell like mildew. But as she walked toward the shelter, Isabella couldn't stop thinking about the business card in her bag. About James Chen and the way he'd looked at her, as if he was trying to place her face. About Thornton Technologies and everything that had been stolen from her. For 5 years, she'd been running. For 5 years, she'd been hiding. For 5 years, she'd let Marcus Blackwood win. Maybe it was time to stop running. The shelter was a converted church, its doors open to anyone who needed refuge. Isabella joined the line of people waiting to check in. Men and women of all ages, all with their own stories of how they'd ended up here. She recognized some of them. There was Tommy, the veteran with PTSD who screamed in his sleep. There was Sarah, who'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. There was Marcus, ironic name, who'd lost his job and his family and turned to the bottle to forget. They were all invisible to the world above.
But they saw each other.
Haven't seen you in a while, Sarah said, moving to stand beside Isabella. She was 19, just a year younger than Isabella, with a scar across her left cheek from a foster father who'd had a temper. You been okay? Surviving, Isabella said. You?
Same.
Got a job interview next week. Gas station, overnight shift. Might finally get out of this place. That's great, Isabella said, and meant it. She'd watched so many people cycle through the shelter system, some making it out, most falling back in. Sarah was smart and tough. If anyone could make it, she could. You should think about getting a job too, Sarah said. I know it's hard without an ID or an address, but there are places that'll work with you.
Under the table stuff.
It's better than begging. Isabella nodded, but she didn't tell Sarah the truth, that she couldn't get a normal job because her social security number belonged to a dead girl. That any official documentation would alert Marcus to the fact that Isabella Thornton was still alive.
Unless she stopped hiding.
Unless she found a way to fight back. The line moved forward, and soon Isabella was inside the shelter, signing in under the name she'd been using for 5 years, Emma Stone. Not particularly creative, but common enough that it didn't raise eyebrows. She was assigned a bed in the women's dormitory, a narrow cot in a room with 30 others, but it was clean and dry and warm. She claimed her spot, tucking her plastic bag under the thin mattress, and went to the cafeteria for dinner. The meal was simple: chicken, rice, vegetables, and bread. Institutional food, but hot and filling. Isabella sat with Sarah and a few other women, listening to them talk about their days, their hopes, their fears. It was strange how poverty created community. On the streets, they looked out for each other in ways that the wealthy never did. After dinner, there was a chapel service. Isabella didn't consider herself particularly religious. It was hard to believe in a benevolent God when your parents had been murdered and you'd spent 5 years sleeping on sidewalks, but the singing was beautiful, and the warmth of the sanctuary was comforting. As the congregation sang Amazing Grace, Isabella pulled out James Chen's business card and studied it. There was a phone number, an email address, and the company address. Thornton Technologies was headquartered in a building in Midtown, a building her father had designed himself, with the idea that a workspace should inspire innovation and creativity. Isabella wondered what it looked like now, under Marcus's leadership. She wondered if he'd changed everything, erased all traces of her father's vision. She wondered if anyone there remembered Robert Thornton as more than just a name on the company history. She wondered if she had the courage to find out. That night, as Isabella lay in her cot listening to the sounds of 30 women breathing, coughing, and occasionally crying in their sleep, she made a decision. She would call James Chen. She would find out what kind of man he was. And if he could be trusted, if there was even a chance that he might help her, she would tell him the truth. That Isabella Thornton wasn't dead.
That she was coming home.
That Marcus Blackwood's reign was about to end. But first, she had to survive one more night. One more night of cold and fear and uncertainty. Because the streets had taught her one crucial lesson: hope was dangerous. Hope could get you killed. Still, as Isabella drifted off to sleep, she allowed herself to hope anyway. Tomorrow, she would make the call. Tomorrow, everything would change. Isabella woke to the sound of crying. It was still dark in the dormitory, that deep pre-dawn darkness that made everything feel hopeless. 3 cots down, a woman was sobbing into her pillow, trying to muffle the sound but failing.
No one got up to comfort her.
On the streets, you learn to respect the privacy of someone else's pain. Isabella lay still, staring at the water-stained ceiling, her hand wrapped around James Chen's business card beneath her pillow. She'd barely slept, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears.
What would she say when she called?
How could she possibly convince him that she was who she claimed to be? And the biggest question of all, what if James Chen was loyal to Marcus Blackwood? The thought made her stomach clench. For all she knew, James was Marcus's right-hand man, the person who helped him consolidate power after the Thornton family's death. If she revealed herself to the wrong person, Marcus would know she was alive within hours. And this time, he wouldn't fail to kill her. But she couldn't keep living like this. She couldn't spend another 5 years invisible and voiceless while Marcus lived in luxury off her father's legacy. At some point, survival wasn't enough. At some point, you had to live. The morning bell rang at 6 o'clock, a gentle chime that meant it was time to vacate the dormitory. The shelter needed to prepare for the day's activities: job training programs, counseling sessions, medical checkups. Those who had nowhere else to go would spend the day in the common areas or back on the streets, returning in the evening to wait in line for another bed. Isabella gathered her belongings and made her way to the women's bathroom, where she waited in line for one of the 4 shower stalls. When her turn came, she stood under the lukewarm spray for exactly 3 minutes, the posted limit, and washed away the grime of the streets with the harsh industrial soap the shelter provided. She changed into her other set of clothes, jeans and a sweatshirt that had once been black but had faded to a dingy gray. Both hung loose on her frame. She'd lost at least 30 pounds in the last 5 years, her body burning through whatever calories she managed to consume. Looking in the mirror above the sinks, Isabella barely recognized herself. Her cheekbones were sharp beneath pale skin. Her dark hair, which she'd cut herself with kitchen scissors, stuck up in uneven tufts. But her eyes, those were still the same. Green with flecks of gold, exactly like her mother's. Those were the eyes that James Chen had recognized. After breakfast, oatmeal and coffee, Isabella left the shelter and walked to the public library on 42nd Street. It opened at 10, and she was waiting at the doors when they unlocked. Inside, it was warm and quiet, a sanctuary from the chaos of the city. Isabella found an empty chair in the reading room and sat down, pulling out James's business card. It was now or never. The library had public phones near the bathrooms, relics from a different era that somehow still worked. Isabella stood in front of one for a full 5 minutes, the business card trembling in her hand, before she finally picked up the receiver and dialed the number.
It rang once. Twice. 3 times.
James Chen's office, this is Melissa speaking.
An assistant.
Isabella hadn't anticipated that. She'd imagined James answering directly, but of course an executive vice president would have someone screening his calls. I need to speak with Mr. Chen, Isabella said, her voice barely above a whisper. May I ask who's calling? Isabella's mind raced. She couldn't use her real name, not over a phone line that could be monitored. But she needed to say something that would make James remember her. Tell him it's the woman from the subway entrance yesterday. Tell him I need his help.
There was a pause. Please hold.
Elevator music filled the line. Isabella's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She watched the library patrons moving past her, students with laptops, elderly people reading newspapers, a mother with 2 children looking at picture books. Normal people living normal lives. What would it feel like to be normal again? This is James Chen. His voice was exactly as she remembered it. Calm, authoritative, but with an undercurrent of warmth that suggested genuine kindness. Mr. Chen, Isabella said, I'm the woman you helped yesterday. You gave me money and your card. I remember, he said. Are you safe? Did you make it to the shelter? The fact that his first concern was her safety made Isabella's eyes sting with unshed tears.
Yes. Thank you for that. But I
need to talk to you about something. Something important.
Of course. What do you need?
Isabella took a deep breath.
This was it.
The moment that would either save her or doom her.
Not over the phone, she said. Can we meet somewhere?
Somewhere public.
There was a long pause.
Isabella could almost hear him weighing his options, wondering if this was safe, if she was dangerous, if this was some kind of scam. There's a coffee shop called Brew Haven on 53rd Street, he finally said.
Do you know it?
I can find it. I can meet you there at noon. I have a meeting until 11:30, but I can move my lunch. Thank you, Isabella whispered. Mr. Chen, you need to know that what I'm going to tell you will sound impossible. But I need you to listen. I need you to hear me out before you make any decisions. Another pause, longer this time. You're not going to tell me you're a long-lost relative who needs money, are you? Because I've heard that one before. Despite everything, Isabella almost smiled. No. It's not about money. It's about the truth. The truth about what? About Thornton Technologies. About what really happened 5 years ago. About who I really am. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Isabella held her breath, waiting for him to hang up, to dismiss her as a crazy person or a con artist. Who are you? James asked quietly, and Isabella could hear something in his voice that hadn't been there before.
Fear, maybe. Or hope.
Noon at Brew Haven, Isabella said. I'll tell you everything then. She hung up before he could respond, before she could lose her nerve, before the weight of what she was about to do could crush her. Isabella spent the next 2 hours walking the streets of Manhattan, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She walked past the building that housed Thornton Technologies, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that stretched 40 stories into the sky. Her father had been so proud of this building. He'd kept a photograph of it on his desk, next to pictures of Isabella and her mother. Was that desk still there? Did Marcus sit in her father's chair, make decisions in her father's office, pretend to be the visionary that Robert Thornton had actually been? The thought made Isabella's hands clench into fists. She'd been powerless for so long, had accepted her invisibility for so long, that the sudden surge of anger felt almost foreign.
But it also felt right.
Anger was fuel. Anger could be the weapon she needed to take back what was hers. At 11:30, Isabella made her way to Brew Haven. It was a small coffee shop tucked between two larger buildings, the kind of place that survived on regulars rather than tourists. She positioned herself across the street where she could see the entrance but remain hidden in the doorway of a closed bookstore. She needed to see if James came alone. At exactly noon, a black town car pulled up to the curb. James Chen stepped out, alone, and entered the coffee shop. Isabella watched for another 5 minutes, scanning the street for any sign of surveillance, anyone who might have followed him. But there was nothing suspicious, just the normal flow of lunch-hour traffic. Finally, Isabella crossed the street and entered Brew Haven. It was warm inside, filled with the scent of fresh coffee and baked goods. James sat at a corner table, 2 cups of coffee already in front of him. He stood when he saw her, his expression carefully neutral. "Thank you for coming," Isabella said, sliding into the chair across from him.
"I almost didn't," James admitted, sitting back down.
"My assistant thinks I'm meeting a potential investor. I didn't tell her the truth because I wasn't sure what the truth was."
He pushed one of the coffee cups toward her. "I got you a latte."
"I figured you could use something warm." Isabella wrapped her hands around the cup, absorbing its heat. When was the last time someone had bought her coffee? When was the last time someone had anticipated her needs?
"I don't know how to start," she said. "Start with your name," James suggested. "Your real name."
Isabella looked into his eyes, dark brown, intelligent, searching. He wanted to believe her, she could see that. He'd recognized something in her yesterday, something that had stayed with him. That was why he'd agreed to this meeting. "My name," Isabella said slowly, "is Isabella Marie Thornton. I'm the daughter of Robert and Catherine Thornton. And 5 years ago, I supposedly died with my parents in a home invasion." James's face went completely still. For a long moment, he simply stared at her, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. Then he set it down carefully, his hands steady despite what must have been racing thoughts.
"That's quite a claim," he said. "I know.
Isabella Thornton is dead. I was at her funeral. I saw her coffin." "What was in that coffin?"
Isabella asked.
"Did anyone actually see my body? Or were we told that the bodies were too damaged from the shooting, that the caskets would remain closed?" James's expression shifted slightly. "The caskets were closed. We were told. There were rumors that the scene was gruesome. That identification had been made through dental records." "Dental records that Marcus Blackwood provided," Isabella said. "Dental records that he could have easily falsified. He had the resources, the connections, and the motivation." "You're saying Marcus Blackwood killed your family?" "I'm saying Marcus Blackwood orchestrated the murders, yes. I don't know if he pulled the trigger himself or hired someone to do it, but he's responsible. And I'm saying he let everyone believe I was dead so no one would question him taking over the company." James leaned back in his chair, his analytical mind clearly working through the implications. "If what you're saying is true, and that's a very big if, why would you wait 5 years to come forward? Why live on the streets? Why not go to the police immediately?" "Because I was 18 years old and terrified," Isabella said, her voice cracking. "Because I watched my parents die. Because I heard the bullets that were meant for me. Because I knew that Marcus had enough money and power to make me disappear if I tried to expose him. Because I didn't think anyone would believe me." She pulled out the worn photograph from her plastic bag and slid it across the table. "This is from my 18th birthday party. 2 weeks before my parents died." James picked up the photograph, studying it carefully. Isabella watched his face as he looked at the image. The beautiful girl in the silver dress, standing between her parents, all 3 of them radiant with wealth and happiness and the certainty that their world would last forever. Then James looked up at Isabella, his eyes moving from the photograph to her face and back again, and she saw the exact moment when he started to believe her. "The eyes," he whispered. "That's what I recognized. Even through everything else that's changed, your eyes are exactly the same." Isabella's vision blurred with tears. After 5 years of invisibility, someone finally saw her. Someone finally knew she was real. "I need your help," she said. "I need to know what happened to the company after my father died. I need to know if there's any way to prove what Marcus did. I need to know if there's anyone left at Thornton Technologies who might believe me. James set the photograph down carefully, his mind clearly racing.
This is...
Isabella, if what you're saying is true, you're in serious danger. If Marcus finds out you're alive,
He'll kill me, Isabella finished. I know.
that's why I've been so careful. That's why I've stayed hidden for 5 years.
But I can't do it anymore, James.
I can't let him win. I can't let him steal everything my father built.
Tell me what happened that night, James said.
Tell me everything you remember.
So Isabella did.
She told him about the dinner party her parents had been planning, about how Marcus had arrived early with champagne and smiles. She told him about hiding in the hallway when she heard angry voices, about watching through a crack in the door as Marcus pulled out a gun. She told him about running through the mansion, about the bullets that had shattered windows and shredded wallpaper. She told him about hiding in the woods behind the estate, watching as police cars and ambulances arrived, knowing she couldn't go to them because Marcus was standing right there, directing the investigation. She told him about the first night on the streets, about selling her jewelry, about the slow descent into poverty and invisibility. When she finished, James was quiet for a long time. Outside, the lunch crowd had thinned, and the coffee shop was nearly empty. They'd been talking for over an hour. I believe you, James finally said. I don't know why, but I believe you. Maybe it's because I knew your father. He talked about you all the time, showed me pictures of you at Harvard, told me how proud he was that you were going to take over the company someday. And Marcus. There's always been something off about Marcus. The way he stepped into Robert's role so seamlessly, the way he changed everything so quickly.
It felt wrong. Can you help me? Isabella asked.
Can you help me prove what he did? James rubbed his face with both hands, the weight of the decision clearly pressing down on him. What you're asking me to do could destroy my career. Could put both of our lives at risk. If Marcus finds out I'm helping you, if we can't prove what he did.
I know, Isabella said.
I know what I'm asking.
And if you say no, I'll understand.
You have a life, a career. You shouldn't have to risk that for a stranger. You're not a stranger, James said quietly. You're Robert Thornton's daughter. And your father. He saved my career when I made a huge mistake early on. Everyone else wanted to fire me, but he gave me a second chance. He believed in me when no one else did. I owe him everything. He looked at Isabella, and she saw determination in his eyes. I'll help you. But we have to be smart about this. We need evidence, witnesses, something concrete that proves Marcus killed your parents and stole the company. And we need to keep you safe while we gather that evidence. How do we start? James thought for a moment. First, we get you off the streets. I have a friend who owns a building in Brooklyn, small apartments. I can get you a place to stay, no questions asked. Second, we need to get you looking more like yourself. Hair, clothes, proper nutrition. If we're going to prove you're Isabella Thornton, you need to look like Isabella Thornton. I don't have any money, Isabella said quietly. I'm not asking you to pay, James said. Consider it an investment in justice. Or consider it me paying back the debt I owe your father. Isabella's throat tightened with emotion. Why are you doing this? You barely know me. For all you know, I could be lying about everything. James smiled slightly. I'm a good judge of character. It's why your father trusted me. And I see something in you, Isabella. Under all the dirt and the fear, I see strength. I see your father's determination and your mother's grace. You've survived 5 years on the streets, 5 years of believing you had no hope. That takes an incredible amount of courage. He pulled out his phone and made a call.
David? It's James Chen. I need a favor.
Do you still have that vacant apartment in Brooklyn?
The 1-bedroom?
Yes, I need it for a friend. Long term, but I'll cover the rent. Can you have it ready by tonight?
He listened for a moment, then nodded. Perfect.
I'll send you the details. Thanks, David. James hung up and looked at Isabella.
You have a home.
As of tonight, you have a place to live. Isabella couldn't speak. After 5 years of sleeping on sidewalks and in shelters, the concept of having her own apartment, her own space, seemed impossible. Thank you, she finally whispered. Don't thank me yet, James said. This is just the beginning. Taking down Marcus Blackwood won't be easy. He's smart, powerful, and utterly ruthless. But if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. We're going to gather evidence, build a case, and expose him for what he really is. He reached across the table and took Isabella's hand. His grip was warm and firm, an anchor in the storm. "Welcome back from the dead, Isabella Thornton," he said. "Let's go take back your life." That evening, Isabella stood in the doorway of her new apartment, unable to believe it was real. It was small, just one bedroom, a tiny kitchen and a bathroom, but it was clean and warm and private. There was a bed with actual sheets, a table with 2 chairs, even a small television. James had stopped at Target on the way and bought her basics: toiletries, towels, some simple clothes, food for the refrigerator. He'd tried to give her money too, but Isabella had refused. She'd take the apartment because she needed a safe place to stay, but she didn't want to feel like a charity case. "Get some rest," James had said before leaving. "Tomorrow, we start working on transforming you back into Isabella Thornton. I know a hairstylist who's discreet. We'll get you some proper clothes. And then we'll start investigating." Now, alone in the apartment, Isabella walked to the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. For the first time in 5 years, she saw herself in proper lighting, not the harsh fluorescence of shelter bathrooms or the dim reflection in store windows.
She looked terrible.
Gaunt, exhausted, years older than her 23 years. But beneath that, she could still see traces of the girl she'd been. The girl who'd walked Harvard's campus with confidence, who'd sat in boardrooms with her father, who'd been groomed from birth to lead a technology empire. That girl was still in there somewhere. Isabella turned on the shower, her own shower, with hot water that wouldn't run out after 3 minutes, and stood under the spray for 20 minutes, washing away 5 years of dirt and shame and fear. She scrubbed her skin until it was pink, washed her hair 3 times, and let the water wash away her tears. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a clean towel, she felt lighter. Not whole, she wouldn't be whole until Marcus Blackwood paid for what he'd done, but lighter. She put on the clean clothes James had bought, soft pajama pants and a t-shirt, and climbed into the bed. The mattress was firm, the pillow was soft, and the blanket was warm. Isabella lay there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the city outside her window, and allowed herself to feel hope. Tomorrow, the work would begin. Tomorrow, she would start transforming back into Isabella Thornton. Tomorrow, she would start building the case against Marcus Blackwood. But tonight, for the first time in 5 years, she would sleep in a bed. She would sleep in safety. She would sleep knowing that she was no longer alone in her fight. As Isabella drifted off to sleep, she didn't know that Marcus Blackwood had already heard whispers about a woman asking questions about the Thornton family. She didn't know that he had people watching James Chen, suspicious of his recent unusual behavior. She didn't know that the security guard who'd told her to move along outside Cartier was actually one of Marcus's informants, and that he'd photographed her face and sent it to his employer. And she didn't know that Marcus was, at that very moment, staring at that photograph on his computer screen, his face pale with recognition, realizing that the threat he thought he'd eliminated 5 years ago had just walked back into his life. The game had changed. And Marcus Blackwood never lost a game. Marcus Blackwood stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his corner office on the 40th floor of Thornton Technologies, staring at the photograph on his tablet with hands that trembled ever so slightly.
It couldn't be her. It was impossible.
He'd watched Isabella Thornton die 5 years ago, or at least, he'd watched his hired man fire 3 shots into the woods where she'd been running.
He'd heard her scream.
He'd seen the blood on the leaves the next morning when he'd gone back to check alone, before the police could secure the scene. But the woman in this photograph, dirty and disheveled as she was, had Isabella's eyes. Those distinctive green eyes with flecks of gold that Catherine Thornton had passed down to her daughter. Marcus enlarged the image, studying every detail. The bone structure was right, even under the gauntness of malnutrition. The shape of her nose, the curve of her jaw, the way she held her head even in defeat, it was all Isabella. She was alive. "Sir." Marcus turned to find his head of security, Victor Reeves, standing in the doorway. Victor was ex-military, 6'4" of pure muscle and absolutely no conscience. He'd been invaluable over the years, handling the situations that required a certain flexibility with the law. "Victor," Marcus said, his voice carefully controlled despite the panic clawing at his chest.
"This photograph.
Tell me everything you know about this woman." Victor stepped forward, glancing at the tablet. "That's from Dimitri, one of our street informants. He's been keeping an eye on the high-end shopping districts like you asked, watching for anyone who might be casing the stores or looking suspicious. This woman has been begging outside Cartier for the past few weeks. Dimitri says she's harmless, just another homeless person." "When was this taken?"
2 days ago.
Marcus's mind raced.
2 days ago.
The same day James Chen had left the office early for a personal appointment that wasn't on his calendar. The same day Chen had taken $100 cash from the ATM in the lobby, unusual for a man who rarely carried cash. I want to know everything about this woman, Marcus said. Where she sleeps, where she eats, who she talks to. I want her followed 24 hours a day. But discreetly, Victor. Very discreetly. She can't know she's being watched.